Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Speculative Speculations. I'm Varsha.
Jared.
I'm Chris.
Steve.
And this is a series where we talk about speculative stories in all their forms. Today, we're going to be talking through up to part 3 of Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky. It's the first book in the Children of Time trilogy by the same author. The short story for today is going to be The Microscopic Giants by Paul Ernst, which was quite a trip. And next week, because of this author, I know this one's going to be a trip as well, Tilon Akbar Orbis Statius by Jorge Luis Borges. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Wow.
Nice.
So
Yeah.
that's going to be a short story. A lot happened in Children of Time, and I know some of us have to leave early today, so let's get started. So in this section, the spiders make bombs, they discover religion or invent religion, whichever way you want to think about it.
Mhm.
And the two civilizations finally meet, although apparently not yet for the long term. Where do you guys want to start first? The bombs, right? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, there's also two conflicts as well. There's one on the planet and then there's one up in space as well. So I mean,
Yeah.
that's section 3 is called War, and there's multiple wars that are essentially going on within it. I think I'd start by just saying I think both sections serve to give the reader a sense of the state of play, so to speak. So technologically on the planet where they're at, kind of the ecosystems that run in there, the kind of not just the spider life, but actually the bigger world that's around them. And then same for up above, kind of the capabilities of the ships in space, the human race, or wherever it's at the moment. And I mean, it can't just be me. This is probably a very popular opinion, but the planet spider stuff's like 90% more interesting than the space stuff.
Oh, I don't know.
Interesting.
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 Very interesting.
Because I was going to say not quite the opposite, but the
interesting.
spider stuff is interesting, right? Like on a surface level, it's very interesting, and when I finish a chapter, I'm very satisfied with it. But as I'm reading it, I can't wait for it to get over because it's very description heavy, and those tend to bog me down a little bit. I find that I read a lot faster when there's dialogue, when there's interaction between characters and so on. This reads like the transcription of a Discovery documentary or like a history book even. and that's a great style. I think that's fantastic. It's mildly bogging me down in the spider sections. Although finally what we find out at the end of each section, I think, is pretty satisfying. So it's a bit of both. So the information, very interesting, 90% more, I agree with you. But the actual reading of it, not so much.
Interesting.
I agree. I think the space and human interactions I feel like they're more, I don't know if it's more relatable, but I think it's the spider stuff and the ants, and it's all interesting, but I have a hard time connecting to those. Like you said, it's more descriptive, and it sounds more like a nature like a nature thing. It's still great, but I love the idea that Holston wakes up and you go to hypersleep thinking, I'm going to wake up and XYZ will be here you go to sleep and you're so vulnerable. I mean, you're just sleeping. So you have no control over what happens when you're in hypersleep and you wake up and come to find out everything is completely different and you're suddenly a hostage. I love that. Was great. I love that.
Well, I'm on. I split the party here because I'm on Chris's side. I found the spiders in the their society fascinating, and maybe like Vaja was saying, it's like reading a history book, and of course that's right up my alley. So I'm just like so into that, and I love it how like right off in a section I think we started with 2:6, and it says one of the things they say is it is the world's first superstate when her colony was mentioned in there, and it was like, so I could see the evolution of the society because they're evolving as like the humans are asleep for how many 100 years. We don't know how long. It's a long time, and so it was just neat to see the change in how this character is still named Portia, but she's taken that name from generations down the line, and it's really cool how to see how the society evolved, and I'm just so into that stuff. And one of the key things that really was pointed out to me was there was one line that said, like humans, Portia's people are quick to see patterns, sometimes where there are none. And that is taken directly out of the cognitive state of evolution that it was key to humans' development on Earth, to develop things like religion, storytelling, and things like that. And so that is really taking hold of the spider society, and I'm really interested in to see where that goes, because they, the spiders. But it said her descendants will tell how she entered the temple of the ants and stole the eye of their god. So this, the idea of storytelling and religion are really taking hold in their evolutionary development, and it's just fascinating to me. I love it.
And I love the way that the stories connect when the ship there's a crash landing, and it impacts the battle. And did anyone else get Starship Troopers vibes when the ants rolled in?
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't read the book, the Heinlein book, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't read it.
Definitely the movie. I mean,
yeah.
When the ant's eating a person's leg or whatever, she's screaming. That was like a horror film right there.
Oh,
that was gruesome, like properly gruesome.
Yeah.
I hate ants even when they are tiny, and these are large ants. I mean, I don't think I haven't seen many ants in the US. Actually, I don't think I've seen any since I moved here. But in India, if you put sugar out, ants will come. And if you, I don't know, try to eat something. Like, I've been bitten in my tongue by ants because I ate something and I didn't realize that there were ants in the food. It's horrible. So big ants eating this person alive, terrifying.
I know. They said they were 20 centimeters. That's crazy.
Size of your hand, yeah.
Ant size.
So.
Oh man.
They're big. But yeah, I love all the parallels between the ant society, not the spider society and the human society.
Yeah.
Like, of course, there's the natural parallel with the evolution and stuff, but I love the finding your space in the universe aspect of it, where the humans, like, immediately after Holston and Lane have this conversation about how they don't have a hierarchy, they don't have any leaders and no structure or culture. The spiders have the exact same problem. Or is it? Yeah, I think the spiders have the exact same issue in that they don't have an emerging leader, they don't have like a high-level decision maker and so on. So that was brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then for the religion, it's a fascinating religion because I think a lot of religions in our world, they preclude knowledge or science, but this one is based on mathematics, which I would be very interested to see the evolution of this religion.
It even took a hostage and experimented.
Yeah. And they almost started communicating. And she's a classicist, right? She's the one, or classicist, how you say that. She was the one who ran. So it makes sense. She's familiar with trying to interpret a language when you don't have a lot of context. So it really makes sense that she started trying to communicate with them towards the end. And I love that the spiders concluded that she's a dumb animal at the level.
That was so good.
That was awesome. Yeah.
Oh, that was brilliant.
And a funny line earlier was when they were referring to the those antique psychopaths during Earth's last toxic days. studying them had seemed like bad taste. Nobody likes a classicist, and then, of course, you just mentioned the classicist with the spiders.
Oh God!
Yeah.
What a way to go!
So gruesome. What a nightmare.
Yeah. But there's so much, like, the stuff that's up in space is very classic space opera to me. It is incredibly readable, but it's the stuff on the ground I just keep reading and going, this stuff's properly genius. Like, this is unlike, again, a biological kind of sci-fi thing, because we've read obviously a couple of them this year and kind of made our way through the Jeff Vandermeer, his take in doing that. But here we have a look at science in terms of biology, in terms of animals and evolution, and the whole thing, every layer that they could put on it, like even when they are giving Portia the instructions about what to do, you know, to resolve everything, they're checking whether she's laid her eggs, so that, you know, the evolution is maintained, that they know the spiders are that advanced that they know that actually regardless of what happens in the now, it's the passing on of that understanding, as they call it, that is the most important thing for the progression as a race. You know, they are decentralized with all these nests and hives that they've set up themselves, but they can see that they're kind of pushing towards a more evolved society from this stage going forward. Portia sort of sees it. Obviously, Bianca sees it as well. The genius, and I sort of love the idea of the spider in the lab coat that she's kind of put in for herself and run about, you know, with the thing. That hard to know which one's Bianca. The white coat. That's her over there, you know. So there are very, very key things about moving forward, and then, as you say, when the two worlds kind of collide, it's only then we get a sense of scale, you know, in terms of comparing. You know, when we're trying to say, oh, they're ants or they're spiders, it's only when we see the humans against them and things that we recognize that we kind of go, okay, this is a world now very different from ours, even though it's based on our ecosystem.
And I love that the colonists are, you know, they had an expectation of this nice habitable planet, and they end up on this moon where there's like, you're gonna plant the seeds and you'll be long dead by the time we move on. I'm like, no, I don't think so. I love that it's like you just expect them to just play along, like, you know, your children will benefit or your kids will benefit. Like, no, I don't think so. I want to live over there. I thought that was pretty interesting.
I know.
Too.
You almost couldn't blame them. Like, really?
Yeah.
You're gonna stick me on this cold asteroid, and we have to eke out a living while you guys sleep the whole time? Yeah, I was kind of on their side for a little bit there. What else are they gonna do, though?
Yeah, it's hard to. Yeah, I agree with you. There's not much you can do to blame them there. I mean, is that the best way they could have handled it? Maybe not, but
maybe not.
Yeah, I don't. But you're right. I agree with you. I don't think that they're wrong to feel miserable about it. And I think the context for that was laid immensely well, with Holston being woken up and him straight up starting with, no, I don't want to go there. I don't want to go there. So how can he not empathize with these guys who have the exact same problem? They've resorted to guns to, you know, make it so they don't go. But yeah, I agree with you. And to your point, Chris, I think I agree about the spider stuff being very interesting. Like I said, the reading was slightly difficult, but the information was very, very interesting. And I think in a lot of ways, what makes the space opera a bit different is the spider story, in that it gives meaning to what's happening above in space, and it shapes how we think about it, look at it from an alien context as well, think about it not just as humans, or like almost what would the spiders make of this?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
absolutely.
like,
you can't have one without the other, and it all goes so well. The stories parallel, they fit each other, but it's they're unique situations, but you can see the parallels between the stories. And like one guy said, what's a good lesson of history? You're screwed if you can't pay the army. And the spiders are in the same kind of situation. They got to be able to control their people and pay their people, so to speak, with their whatever form of currency they use. And so I love how just the parallels between the two stories, how they're related, and I loved how they interacted with the first contact, and that was so. I was just so glad it wasn't like, we are aliens, greetings.
Yeah.
and the way it went down, that first contact, it was a first contact, but it was also like, that's it. Get in, get out. A bunch of people are dead and a bunch of people got out, and that was it. That's all the contact. And I was just like, that's great. What a great way to present that.
Yeah. And I love how they sense things in each other. And yeah, I know, like, this is fiction and we don't really know if that's quite how it would happen. But I think we can take an example from how humans and other animals interact. And these are, after all, earthly creatures that have evolved through sapience. But the fact that, like, two things really stood out to me. One, when Holston goes down on the planet and he sees the spider staring at him. And there's this line about how he feels like he's looking back at something almost human. I'm paraphrasing, but it was something to that effect. Like, the spider was encroaching in on a mental space that he has reserved for humans. And I love that that's how that's described. And then the other part of it was towards the end of the section 3 where we stopped, is when I think the second signal that they start receiving is from the moon, right? That's been settled on now. And I think they sense distress in the signal that they're receiving. So I love that they can, like, detect these things in each other, in, like, the sapient aspects of them can be detected. So that was very interesting too, how that was done.
It's also a little scary that given this setup, and if you're someone who has the power to settle on these planets, you can essentially play God. I mean, whether it's with spiders or with other animals or humans, it's your playground, and if you have the power and influence, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, that's what Dr. Averna wanted to do. That's her name, right?
Yeah.
Kearns, right? Kearns.
Mm-hmm.
That's what she wanted to do originally. That was her whole idea, was she was going to be a god. Didn't quite go right, but.
And it was really interesting that they made the messenger the god, right? And so arguably humans could be their gods because they come from the sky and they've built this whole religion around the messenger. But because of what happened and how the landing happened, do I remember correctly that the spiders conclude, or at least Portia concludes, that the creature was sent to them as a gift, the human creature, to tell them how superior they are. So now they're no longer going to be gods. They're probably going to be slaves to the level of the ants, or at least that's how the spiders are going to see them. Which is, yeah, again, I think that makes for very interesting potential future dynamics between the two races.
Dumb beast.
But isn't it interesting how Tchaikovsky kind of plays an idea that you can't have an advanced society without some sort of faith? Both, from terms of the ants, and then when the spiders get the crystal of some sort, that there is a faith that goes into that they are, because of their sentience or because of their progress, they are being designed, and the people that designed them obviously left this crystal for them to go ahead and do that. And it's sort of like, I can't remember if it was in this story and one of the other ones. This is where they're all sort of bleeding together for me in some ways, where they kind of talk about the idea that we make hypothesis based on the available information that we have in terms of, what we see and what we sense. And so we kind of make our decisions about what the higher power is based on that, even though in reality it's a limited set of information that we actually have to be able to do that. So that's where the end of that, I think, kind of falls into that fallacy of what we perceive these people to be. They did come down and then jet off again, so it's kind of this idea that, okay, there's something else going on there. And when they look up, obviously they see the moon base, and they see it working on a couple of multiple levels there. So again, there's probably a state of confusion there, but it probably also makes some sort of sense to them, because they see an evolved society that's more, not just one thing. They see it now diversified in a couple of places.
Yeah, well, that's what why I was pointing out the aspect of storytelling earlier was because the storytelling leads to faith because faith requires storytelling in order to explain it, and that whole birth of imagination of cognitive development leads to that kind of things, and that imagination allows for the growth of a society to excel. Yeah, so you're right, you're dead on.
Yeah. And in that context, I think there was something about how the transference of like straight up fragments of memory makes it difficult to mythologize, but they still find a way around that. Or like there are some things that still become part of sort of like the mythological state of the world. And I think also with enough generations, I think something can become proper mythology, perhaps, because because I believe there was something to the effect that you can only have a limited number of memories transferred. Like that was an interesting constraint there. So you don't have entire generational memory, so there's scope for modifications there. And so eventually, I think to your point about storytelling, we might build mythologies around these originators of the spider race.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to see more.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, like that. And I did have that same question to Chris about whether Tchaikovsky saying that you cannot have an advanced civilization without building some sort of religion. But I mean, I guess that leads to the question: can you have an advanced society without religion? And that's an interesting thought experiment. What would that look like? Even something so this society apparently started in science, right? Like that's one of the first sapient things they seem to have done, and they've built a religion around it too. So are we seeing a different definition of religion than maybe we are familiar with, or is it that you're going to have a religion and a god no matter what where you start?
Interesting question.
Interesting question. Yeah. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think I would, there's no recorded means of knowing for us, in our case, whether or not somebody decided to invent a tool first or invent a god. So it might be all in one. It might, it's who knows. And and that's interesting that Tchaikovsky's given us a little insight into how the spiders are doing it, but that doesn't preclude that was any different than how humans did it. You really can't know.
Yeah, it's again, say this every week, but with science fiction being about the present, I think we're sort of in a phase of humanity now where religion in some sections is falling apart as far as the guiding force for direction, if you know what I mean. I think we're over the past certainly 20, 30 years, we've seen certain sections of Christianity kind of, a lot of people fall away from it. I can't speak to other cultures and other religions, but I definitely see that here, and there is some conversation that even within that context of the formal religion, we have replaced that kind of God faith-based system with things like belief in corporations, belief in business, belief in social media, and the power of expression, and that whole idea of the cultural war. So there is still some sort of belief and faith system kind of going on, but just very, very different from the one we were looking at beforehand. And I think that's kind of more the themes that he's probably kind of talking about and exploring through his writing, because like he doesn't make any judgment call on it. He just kind of puts it out there as a question, just to kind of ponder over, which I always really appreciate.
That's good.
I would imagine if you're starting a civilization from the ground up, you need something for everyone to unify and to be willing to die for.
Yeah,
because it does. Like we found out this time, they go on this mission and they know they're not all going to come back. So I think you need some kind of unifying idea to keep to bring everyone together to rally around and to believe in, even to death. Otherwise, there has to be some kind of purpose for the greater good, not for the self, but for the greater good and for the future, not for individual goals, because it's survival.
Yeah. That's a good point, Steve, because that's what I think the humans in the story are struggling with right now, is they don't really have that unifying goal. They have some guy who's claiming he's in charge, or he's acting like he's in charge, but nobody actually said he was. He just kind of took over, and he's telling some people to go somewhere, and they disagree, and there's not like a unifying purpose to how they want to approach the continuance of the human race.
Yeah. I love that exploration and conversation they had about when they said, I can't remember the other general guy that they woke up, Karst, was it, I think? That they said, well, he mightn't do what you think, because you can't pay him. And it sort of indicates that religion as a system broke down on Earth beforehand, probably leading to destruction in some way. As you quite rightly say there, Jared, you need something that is common goal for everybody. And the problem that the humans have is that some people want them to be in the moon. People don't want to be in the moon. There is no kind of, it isn't enough just to be the last humans. They're actually thinking on a higher level, kind of going, well, if I'm the last human, I don't want to be doing this role in society. And I don't want to be the fodder while other people kind of do the cool stuff or the interesting stuff for the thing where I can use my skills. And again, that kind of contrast between one society that's supposedly way evolved and the other one that's progressive, like you can see which one's growing and which one's very stagnant at the moment, that's sort of fighting and has an internal conflict, even though the wars are happening both places. Really, really interesting.
Yeah, not only for the greater good, but it's also a form of control, like you said, Chris. It's just, because if you use it as a form of control, then you can, people that are going to be like, oh, live and die, and hopefully generations down, someone will benefit from this, but I'm going to do it because it's the right thing to do, instead of, I don't want to do that. So yeah, it's really interesting.
You only need to look through most of the earliest, parts of human history, any documented history. A lot of holy wars in there. A lot of people fighting for commons. Like crusades were essentially just a holy war. And if it wasn't a holy war, it was about identity and kind of belief and grouping of culture in some other ways. That's still going on today.
That's a great point, because now I think the war between the spiders and the ants is for territory, right? Like if they left each other alone, they would all be fine by it. Or even without that, the spiders want to expand, and they know they can't without attacking the ant territory. So now it's sort of a need/survival thing. But maybe as they evolve more, it'll be fighting over your belief systems, and you believe differently than mine. And whether that'll be against other species or spiders versus spiders, I guess. I think an interesting question, and I hope that Tchaikovsky explores this in the upcoming books, is whether the spiders will end up in the same place as humans, or if they'll go about it differently and build better societies and not end up in this situation where they end up destroying each other and their planet.
I think he might have hinted at it a little bit, because right now he has the idea in their society that killing a male spider, sanctioned or not, is a world apart from killing a beast. So they have that strata right there. And she said that like sometimes the like some female spiders would descend to the lower reaches of the city and engage in hunting males, and that's kind of covertly overlooked. So it's something a little bit frowned upon. The girls will be girls quote he put in there, which I found hilarious.
So good, wasn't it? It was so good.
Yeah. And so there is a little bit of a societal tension there, and you wonder if in the future will that be kind of a like a movement in the future, male autonomy or something. Do you wonder if that's going to happen amongst these spiders? So hopefully those are little hints that he's giving us, that may come to fruition later on in a further conflict in the society.
Yeah, love that exploration of patriarchy and matriarchy in reverse, because I think exactly as you say, I think we're going to see a situation like the rising up for the vote, etc. That's going to happen, because that lovely scene where Portia goes into Bianca's lab and said, "You're having men do smart things for you. They're not capable of that kind of higher level thinking. What are you thinking? This is going to go to ruin." Very, very funny, but also pertinent in terms of like poking at the evolution of humanity in a lot of ways, because that wasn't that long ago when exactly, just over 100 years ago, when that kind of thinking was very pervasive right throughout Western culture, certainly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the matriarchal society and all the thoughts the female spiders have about the male spiders, it is very interesting. It reawakened all the rage that I sometimes feel when I hear similar things said about women. Like it's not vindication I feel so much as rage at the female spiders instead of the male spiders, which is so I think that whole thing is really well done. We've had a few short stories that we've read in this podcast where a similar reversal was explored. Some of them did it well, others not so much. I think this, once again, is a pretty nuanced take on the whole thing. Like, to build the evolution of that, I think will be pretty interesting.
And like a lot of things, it's just another tiny little thread within a lot of them. It is not the point of the books. It's just a flavor. It's just a little bit that runs alongside. And I think that's, again, one of the things that keeps on impressing me about this book is that it has so many levels to it, and it is so much that it's trying to do and say. And it's still phenomenally readable. Like, you read it very, very quickly, and it's not dumbed down. It's just kind of all this barrel of ideas. It's just brilliantly executed so far, anyway.
So, battle of ideas, not battle of monkeys.
Monkeys aren't there. They didn't make it, unfortunately.
But yeah, I agree with you. I think I am impressed at how many things he's exploring. And it's not like he started 20 different threads to explore each thing. It's just in the framing or in the structuring of the story, in the telling of it, the exploration of religion, everything comes from just this simple framework of exploring the evolution of a species, which is brilliant, and you can do all sorts of things with it. And he's doing it really well. It's not with the number of distinct themes that we could probably list. None of it bogs you down, I don't think so.
Yeah. And the next section is called Enlightenment, so I'm wondering what that enlightenment's going to be.
Really excited by the idea of the title, because again, it's those stages of evolution, isn't it? The kind of like a warring states, and then getting to the age of enlightenment, and then dark ages, through the enlightenment, etc. We'll have the technology age coming. Book 3.
Book 3.
Maybe their enlightenment is more religion. We don't know.
It could be, yeah, indeed. Well, here's a question. Here's a question that, again, I thought was a really interesting idea. The fact that the conflict that has been obviously by generation upon generation between the spiders and the ants is resolved by the spiders subjugating the ants, and whether that feels fair, right? They basically took away their free will and imposed their own will on them, and again, in some ways, like, I'm reading it going, I'm glad to see that conflict has been resolved, because, like, war, loss of life, all of that kind of stuff, you want your characters to survive. But on the other hand, it doesn't feel like, one, it's good for the ants. Maybe it will be good for the ants. It depends on the direction of the matriarchy that goes along there. Maybe they can do it better than what we did. But as soon as you subjugate and kind of try and put people underneath you as your workers, literally ants, it's going to blow up at some stage, you would imagine.
Yeah, I think that I felt very conflicted at the resolution of that war, because on the one hand, it is completely non-violent for some definition of non-violent, in that there was no loss of life and that the ants all survived. I was expecting it to be a totally nuclear explosion, and I'm like, you are too young as a species to do that sort of destruction to yourselves. But but on the other hand, they don't. So I think the exploration of the other idea, this is equivalent to taking slaves, right, in a conflict, and not killing everyone, like all the civilians, and taking them as slaves. However, these ants do not have individuality, and apparently, as far as we can tell from the spider's perspective, as long as they have some purpose to direct them, they're happy. So is this not a terrible thing? I think maybe we need to see the ants evolve more to see where that goes. But yeah, again, the framing of that is super interesting, because it's not slaves like we might think of them, but they are. So.
Those poor ants. I thought you hated ants, Vasha.
I do when they're in my milk and my sugar.
But when they're 20 centimeters long and living in half the planet, like as you say, it's going to be so interesting to see, because it's set out at the start that they do intend for them to live symbiotically, right, as two species. But there is no doubt that the spiders have dreams of kind of creating a bigger network rather than these small nests that they have, and that they're kind of going to go through. And they're obviously going to impinge on the territory of the ants, and therefore the development of the ants. It seems almost impossible to avoid at this stage. Like the ants' purpose will be the spider's purpose under this current system, if that makes sense, and they'll just be so their own evolution will be stalled. But again, that'll be really fascinating to read, I think.
I also loved the possid beetles. Is that what they were called? First, I'm sure there are creatures like this in like on our planet. I know there are. I'm pretty sure there are. That just like live and survive off of what the other species are doing. But they're also clever, apparently. First, I love that species exists. And then second, when it comes face to face with Portia, right? That's who we are following, because it thinks that there's another beetle. It sees what it actually is, and it feels horrified, apparently. Like, I don't know how Portia... Well, okay, I think it's not Portia's perspective quite. I think it's a bit of omniscient, these spider sections. So I think we're told that the beetle is horrified. So the fact that it can feel horror at what's being done to another member of species, I think that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
Actually, you said something very interesting there, Vasha. He does slip into omniscient narrator mode when explaining the spiders. You know, sometimes I found that quite interesting. I didn't find it disruptive at all. I thought it was very, very cleanly done and very well done. But because there's a few points where he says stuff like, unlike humans, or like humans, they do this, you know, and the spiders wouldn't think like that. So it was so there's quite a few times where he slips into that omniscient narrator, which is pretty cool, because you don't really see that a lot nowadays. You know, nowadays that's kind of just not the thing, you know. You know, because a lot of people make fun of old science fiction for that very omniscient narrator thing, and nowadays you have usually a third person point of view, pretty strict, you know, and so it was pretty neat. I liked how he did it all.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it, not that I want this answered even, but it's nice to think about who this is written for, like as an omniscient, like who's recording this. It has to be someone human, because they're trying to explain the society to humans, right? And so like the purpose of this narration, is it like it's for, I can imagine it's for some future human being who might land here, or so I was like, there's a, I don't know, like if Elijah wrote all of these, kept track of all of this and kept notes or something to that effect. I think, yeah, but then we also keep slipping into Portia's perspective and her thoughts. So it's nice. It's a mix of both, and it's interesting, and it's difficult to break it down to effectively, for me, it's difficult to break it down to what it's trying to do, but I think it's a very interesting narrative style for sure.
This is one of the few times that there's a lot of hype around this book. I think right around when it was released, and it's lived up to the hype.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I was listening to the
agree.
Huguenots podcast the other day, and they've just done a survey of the readership, and it's number 8 top science fiction book of all time they have on their list. Over a lot of very heady kind of things, and happily so in a lot of ways. So, it has a lot to live up to, but it has, even without execution, it has everything that you want in a science fiction book, which is really big ideas that run far and wide, and that we're going to explore. And at the outset, that's enough for me.
Yep. And it's also interesting. I kind of both expected it to be good, but I'm also surprised by how good it is.
Yeah.
Because I expected it to be good because I read Guns of the Dawn and I loved it. And so I think for me, usually it's difficult when I like an author that they disappoint me with other books and whatnot. But Tchaikovsky is immensely prolific. I think he has 3 books coming out just this year.
Yeah.
So I don't know, when you're writing that fast, sometimes I feel like it's not always to my liking. Like, I tend to find that authors who write that quickly, I tend to not like very much, just for whatever reason. But he's pretty good. I think it feels like a careful, well thought out book overall.
Well, I've read Alien Clay this year. It's similar in some ways to this book, in other ways not. But again, a pretty high standard. It's a very good book. Obviously, Service Model is out this week, actually coming. I have that pre-ordered, and I'll probably read that quite soon as well. So that kind of high rate that he has turned over, especially in multiple genres as he has. He doesn't stick to one genre or one kind of idea. Is so. It's so commendable, because there's none of his books. You very rarely hear anybody say, "Oh God, bit of a dud, that one," and it's amazing to have an author like that. To be perfectly honest, if you're a fan of his work, that you're going to get something new around the corner quite a lot.
Yeah, actually, yeah, that is a great thing to have, and you almost never run out of reading the author's work. I think he has quite a few novellas too that are pretty highly praised.
Yeah. Reading this actually makes me very interested in his fantasy work. I want to.
Shadows of the
definitely want to check that out.
Yeah.
Yes. One of the reasons why I switched the title to, or the introduction to say speculative fiction instead of sci-fi, may or may not have been so we could read.
Devious.
So, what else was interesting in this section?
So much. Okay, so some of the really interesting sections. Again, you get these kind of ideas. You get the idea about why Goyen, isn't it? Isn't that the overall Earth leader? Goyen.
Yes.
Why he was picked to be the leader, because of his long-term planning, etc. So it gives you the idea at that stage that, okay, these things are actually happening by design. If you know what I mean. This kind of parts moving forward, and actually how they're doing it. How do you get people to go to the moon? Well, he actually has got people to go to the moon now, even though there was some loss of life, but he also rooted out some bad characters in the process of it. So it's all quite interesting in terms of those people as well, because obviously we've only really seen it through Holston's eyes at the moment, and kind of smatterings of other people that are around there and what they're doing. And Lane obviously knows way more than she's been telling us.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. Yeah, because at first you just think he's just a jerk, he's just an ass. But when you get her perspective on what he's doing, you start thinking and going, oh, okay. Oh, wait, he's actually qualified for what he's doing. So it'd be interesting to get his perspective and see the reasons for all his decision making before we just go casting judgments, And so there's I think there's some more subtlety to be played out here, and I'm interested in seeing that. I can't wait.
Yeah. Yeah. For the human characters, I'm not sure if this is true, but I think if you keep introducing new characters at each stage, it might be harder to find that connection that we need with the story. So I think it's a pretty clever device to get them to go to sleep, have the spiders evolve a few few more generations, and then come back. We get to see everything through the same characters again. So I mean, I'm expecting that this will last the length of the book, but that's pretty cool that we don't lose the connection to the humans that we're following and like what's going on with them. We don't, because you can't use the same trick where you say Portia, Portia, Portia over and over again, almost making us feel like we're following the same character. So yeah, I think it's pretty clever to get them to go to sleep and wake up every few centuries.
Very clever indeed. Yeah.
Yeah. There was one line that I thought was funny, where one of the mutineers says, "If she wanted to kill us, she would have killed us by now." And Holston thinks to himself, "Based on what information?" He had no idea.
And Hodgson's an interesting character because he's a sympathetic character, but he also has a very limited role and a very limited skill set, if you know what I mean, in terms of what he can do. Even admittingly so himself, he's the one person without ego here in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
He's kind of like, don't ask me to do anything. Like, I'm just that guy, you know.
Yeah.
And the only thing
he's a good reader foil.
Yeah.
Because basically you can be him. Because we have no idea what's going on, and we wouldn't know what to do. so he's kind of us in that situation. It's really the whole thing is clever. I mean, it's just like Vasha, like he was saying, with the way he's set up so that he could keep telling a story over a long period of time and still have us relate to these characters and have it be the same characters, and it's an excellent setup. It's a really clever structural setup for him to be able to tell the story he wanted to tell.
Yep. I agree. And I guess we talked about the war between. Anything interesting with Khan? I think, yeah, she was just more of the same, and she became interested once they showed her the spider footage, but then she's like, nope, you still can't come to my planet.
Mr. Kaito. I wonder how her character will evolve, especially now that there are no monkeys. It's still her experiment. It's still her idea. Does she take an active interest in being the god in some ways, and influencing and watching even in some closer way, while humanity kind of does its own thing and kind of rehabiting around the place? This place is still like the tank in the science lab at this stage. It's very much kind of leave it alone. You can't be interfering with it at this stage. And yet, isn't it hard-coded into the Narrowverse that they can only progress so far? Isn't that right? So they're not allowed to evolve past a certain stage, or at least that was the design of the Nanoverse.
For the monkeys.
Or for the monkeys, yes.
That was for the monkeys. So I'm wondering if it's gonna be different, for these guys, for the spiders or not. We don't know yet, do we?
So spiders. Sorry, I had a computer science joke in my head that I probably am not going to share. But I was going to say Stack Overflow, because you don't have a termination condition at the end of recursion.
Okay, I get you.
So, I think what they told us in the previous section was that the nanovirus is designed to sort of check for an end state, and that end state is never likely to occur with the spiders. So it's just going to keep evolving.
That's right,
yeah, that's what it was. Yeah. Cool.
So, which makes the whole generational memory thing very interesting, because, like, sure, there was this note about how there's only limited information that can pass on to the next generation, but also I imagine part of the evolution makes the brain bigger, so there's more room for memory, so you can transcribe more that way. So how far into history would you remember? And there's a lot of interesting questions there that would come up.
Definitely.
Yeah. So sorry, I made some noise. Got excited. But Was there anything else, or are we ready to talk about some microscopic giants?
Microscopic Giants. Or I don't know about this title. I think it's a bad title.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I can explain. No, I can't. So they're microscopic, right? In size, first of all, they're not, but they're small and they're dense. So no, it doesn't work. I tried.
Yeah. The story was a nice little fun jaunt, but the title, I was like, what?
I like 95% of this quite a lot, except for the bits where it goes, "Oh, this happened because," those bits were terrible.
Exactly. Those were I had one other objection besides that, but yes, those were like, how do you know? How are you so sure of what you know?
Such a leap. They'd say, "Oh, humanity evolved in 2 directions. This must mean," and because they went underground, they had to become more dense. But why did they have eyes?
Wait, I have an answer. I have an answer for that.
Stack Overflow?
Yes.
No.
He yells at you. Yes. No. The author yells at you right on the I don't know what page it was on, but the second or third page.
That's fair.
He says, "You're a confounded skepticism." So there you go. He's yelling at you. Don't have the skepticism. When Belmont says that, when he's first telling the guy that about these creatures he found, and the guy didn't believe him, he's like, they're playing a trick on you. And he yells at him, says, "You're a confounded skepticism." And I was like, oh, is that the author yelling at us just to, chill out and enjoy the story? Don't try to think about the science.
So I didn't have an objection to what he said as to how he said it.
Yes.
It wasn't perhaps this is what happened.
Yes.
It was this happened. Like he was there and saw it all.
Yeah. And there were lots of ideas that were sort of not explored, because I thought with the setup of the story, I thought really interesting. So Eternal Wars, we need as much copper as we possibly can get. I thought actually part of this was going to be about depleting copper within the ground and doing all that. Didn't do anything with that. I kept expecting that to come back round. And the same with the transparent, concrete kind of thing. I was trying to visualize what that would look like, and I was thinking it just looks a bit like one of those kind of ice blocks or something, probably.
Yeah.
Something that
sure.
case, but
you should be a whole lot more worried than you are that concrete went transparent.
Yeah. And then arms started coming out of it, and it was a bit of a horror story, but without actually being. Like, even the bit where kind of half of Belmont went missing, it was just kind of like, and half of him was gone. And they tried to drag him into the concrete, and he wouldn't go. And he just kind of slid down the outside of it. It was more humorous than it was kind of horror-based,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think within the first couple of pages, when we saw the footsteps and then they went down to investigate and there were more footsteps, and this guy thought there was something swirling in the concrete. I loved it. I loved the premise of the story. I thought it was great, and I was like, I cannot wait till we see the little people. And I thought to myself,
I love little people.
Yes.
The Borrower's Top 10 book.
And at that point, I thought to myself, the only way the author could muck this up for me is if there is an all-out gun war at the end of the story.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
And guess what? Well, it didn't quite go completely down the drain when they brought the guns out, because the guns went through them.
Yeah, totally ineffective. So.
I mean, I don't like that bit either. I mean, again, it felt like we've written this kind of dumb story. Like in some ways, this is like Small Soldiers or something, right? The movie in some sort of ways. But he's like, but we have to get some hard science in here. So I'm gonna get a couple of things to happen that I then have to put some science onto, like the gunshots going through them. Oh, density, right?
Yeah. So So here's some more nitpicking on the science. Like, if it's really dense, wouldn't it like ricochet rather than go
I would have
through?
thought so. Molecular makeup, but I don't
Your
know.
confounded skepticism. Come on now. Your confounded skepticism.
It had me doubting what I know about physics, I have to say. Like, at a base level, it did. I was like, and they're really heavy. And, okay, maybe they're for phased. You could have said phased. Phased would have made sense. But no, that's really dense. I was like, those bits, I was like, don't think about it, Chris. Just keep on going.
Yeah. And I mean, the dude is just making stuff up as he goes. He's never seen anything like it. But so it's a pretty, like the title, this is also pretty paradoxical in that the skepticism, I think, is absolutely the right amount, because often in a lot of the stories we've read already, I think strange things happen and people just accept it without questioning it too much. So I like that people thought they were going crazy rather than seeing the things that they were seeing. So that part was great. But then we go from there to, oh, this is why these people look like this, and this is why they can walk through the concrete. So I mean, I thought the explanations were interesting, not necessarily sensible or like scientifically accurate, I don't think, but how, once again, my issue is with how the explanations were presented.
Oh dear.
But yeah.
Published in 1936. In a
set
pulp
in
magazine.
1941, wasn't it? Wasn't it 41 was the setup was?
And so, he was talking about the upcoming war. That was probably something that was, in the winds, so to speak. And of course, that makes sense that copper would be used up. A lot of metal, iron was used up. Everything, people were donating metals to the war effort. So it was, that's some pretty good predilections on his part to see what was coming if a big war was coming. But but going down 40,000 feet in the earth, that's a bit of a stretch.
Yeah.
But so it was cool. It was fun.
Yeah.
It was just a fun story. I liked it.
It was a lot of fun. I went through it like pretty quickly, and like I think in this book 10 pages takes me about an hour. I think I maybe read it in 40 minutes. So that's usually a good sign that I'm enjoying the story.
Oh yeah,
I'd agree with that.
And if you're looking for metaphors, I guess like one that I could come up with is, you can't drill 40,000 feet into the earth without doing some damage. I guess like the ecosystem and whatnot, like you could, I don't think it's quite there, but you could see said themes in the story about, because they are hurting the dense little people's homes apparently by drilling so far in. So that you're causing damage and teaching us to be terrified of them. That's great.
Just reaching into your leg and pulling something out.
I like how the little people were surprised that these guys aren't going through the concrete.
That's so funny.
And then they're like, screw that, we're leaving.
Well, then we get to the end of the story anyway, when he's been tried and they realised, we shouldn't have been down that deep anyway. Like there was no copper down there.
Yeah.
All right, pack it up. This is a bad idea.
Pack it up, let's just get out.
It was like kind of Monty Pythonish.
Yeah. And I like how
it was a dumb idea, anyways.
Yeah, it was a dumb idea anyway. Let's blow up the tunnels. He got acquitted of both sabotage and murder. Based on what? Like, you're not in the real world, clearly. But okay.
Oh, dear.
Okay. But yeah, fun story. I did rather enjoy it. I mean, I might even be among my favorites of all we've read so far. But it's a good story. Cool. Yeah.
Interesting. It might be it's definitely one of the most readable of the stories from the very first page. I just found myself kind of Indian in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. Yeah.
I think I just find the whole idea of little people that can make holes in rocks with their shoes fascinating and infinitely cute, even though they weren't cute. So just for the premise, I think it's sort of in the category of the story where I forget what it was called, but the Venus story where they build like this whole aerial city
Oh
above.
yes.
Yeah, that was also very cute and like just similarly nonsensical, I think. So
Yeah.
cool. Any other points about this or Children of Time before we sign off?
No. Another a fun week.
Yeah, it was a good week.
Yep, very much.
So we'll see everyone in a week from now, discussing up to the end of part 5 of Children of Time and the story by Jorge Luis Borges. I'm not going to try to say the name of that story again. So see everyone in a week. Bye. Thank you so much.